I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe 2, I'm not real sure, 2 or 3 years ago. Kathy and I were doing something we just love to do, and that was go watch Graham play basketball. And we had driven to Lake Waccamaw, where the Boys and Girls Club, where we were playing them, and it was a great game. And it was folks from Scotland Christian with, kind of convoy over there and convoy back. And what they loved to do, especially when they went to Lake Waccamaw, was stop there in that little town, right? What was that little town's name? Whiteville? Whiteville, yeah. There's a Mexican restaurant, and there was probably 30 of us that stopped. Do you remember the night I'm talking about? You remember what happened when we came out of that restaurant? Oh, yeah. Because it was late that night, and it was just such a wonderful celebration, but as we drove into Whiteville, it had just begun to snow. I mean, and it was big old flakes, and it was beautiful, and it was just, and we don't get a lot of snow around here, so, there was a few folks that said, well, I'm headed on back home, but most of us stayed, and Kathy and Graham and I were one of the ones that had like the longest trip to make, because we, a lot of folks stopped there in Laurinburg, Scotland County. But it had just begun to snow, and we were hungry, and we didn't want the night to end. We were celebrating. It was a wonderful night. And so we go in the restaurant, and 25, 30 folks. And by the time they got our orders, and we ate, and then we stood in line to pay, and all this other stuff, we come walking out. And that little dusting of snow had turned into a snow. And it was on the cars, it was on the roads. I mean, it was obvious that it had been snowing the whole time that we've been in there. Now, I've lived in Colorado, I've lived in mountains, I've lived in snow, I've driven in snow. And so, I'm like, well, don't like this, especially, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So we get on that interstate there, 74, and there was one little rut on one side. It was like the 2-lane road, but there was one rut where everybody was trying to stay in. And best speed, about 35 miles an hour. That was about the best speed. There was times when you were in some places where you didn't really see no headlights, you didn't see no cars. And that road was rough. I was scared. That car was hard to handle. We were losing traction, and it wasn't going good, And snow's coming down, and it was almost like those whiteout conditions where you really can't see far in front of you. Kathy kept asking me, "Can you see where we're going?" "Oh yeah, honey, yeah." It was a long trip. I tended to pray a lot that night. Hey, y'all with me on that? I tended to pray a lot. But the conditions were not good. We didn't have provisions. Like if you live up in Colorado, you learn, you put water, you put other things, blankets, you put things in your car so that if you do have these conditions, you can survive in your car. We didn't have none of that. The Lord allowed us to make it home safe that night. Obviously, we're still here. And I tend to say a prayer and say, "Thank you." When we drove up and pulled in, you remember that night? I was tough. That was tough. And they were in a boat. And the storms were beating the waves, and the wind was against them. fourth watch of the night. And they were scared. You ain't got to tell me that. They don't have to say it in verse 24 there, 23. They don't need to add a verse. Well, I'm sorry. It says it right there in 26. They were terrified. Can you put yourself in a place? Can you put yourself mentally in a place like I just tried to do that night and remember the emotion of that night, and remember the feeling of that night of being scared? Take that to the next level. They were terrified. They were terrified. Can you take yourself to a place in your life somewhere back in, maybe it was somebody that you loved was sick. Maybe it was, I don't know, the place where you feared, and maybe even feared God, because you realized God was in control and you're not. Can you take yourself there? To a time in your life where you were scared. And Jesus said, take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. A number of times in the Bible, Old Testament and New, where God says, fear not. Fear not. And I thought about that night. I'll be honest. I thought about that. God does not want me to be afraid. And I was ready to go. I mean, if the trumpet sounds right now, I feel confident. I feel confident. I actually feel excited about that prospect. I told folks week 3 of camp, just come on. I mean, I'm hurting too bad. You know, there's too many things in this life that are not great for me. I may be the only one. I'm not. There's some other folks here that know there's life's not perfect for you. Maybe even say to us this morning, life's not good. I just soon go home. I just as soon go home, folks. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my life. There's a lot of things I really enjoy. I love my family. I love the kids. I love this church. I love what I do. But I just as soon go home. Fear not. It is I. Lord, if it's you, then I can come and be where you are. Let me walk on water. Come on, Peter. Get on out that boat. Get on out of the safety where you feel yourself in a comfortable place and go out to a worse place. They were terrified of those winds and the waves, and the boat that they were in was going to sink. Now he's going to leave the boat. Folks, I've heard lesson after lesson in my life is it's time for your life and your faith where it's time for you to get out of the boat and walk on the water like Peter did that day. And God is challenging you every single day of your life. Walk by faith. Don't look at the winds. Don't look at the waves. When Peter looked at Jesus, he could walk on water. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, we can do all things through Christ that gives me strength. The reason we fear, the reason we fail, is because we lose our focus on the eternal King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Myself included, I feared that night. And I kept hearing the word, fear not, I got this, I got it. Now that's not a guarantee I would have made it home. It's just a guarantee that He's with me there. And whatever happens, He's still going to be with me. Even if it means my death, He's going to call me home. So if I'm ready to go, why did I fear? I don't know. It's the same problem Peter had when he took his eyes off and began to sing. But he had at least the ability and the knowledge and the just self-preservation which when he began to sink, he looked up at his Lord and said, Lord, save me. Folks, we need people this morning who can look up to the Lord and realize the condition that you're in. You're sinking in this world, in a world of sin. You're sinking yourself in it because of you taking your eyes off Jesus, myself included. And we just need some people who will come here this morning and not just sing some songs, but say, Lord, save me, I need you. He reached out his hand and he said, oh, of course I'm there. What? Why did you fear? He lifted him up. They stepped into the boat. And the wind ceased. Now, if you can take yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically that night, it's dark. The winds are beating, you've been afraid, and then you saw your Savior walk on water, and then you start to think He saved you yet again. It's just this roller coaster of up and down, crazy, round and round kind of thing, and then the wind ceased. Can you put yourself there? And one of those places in the Bible where the Bible is just so understated. It's so understated. And those in the boat worship. And if that's the way you read it, you missed it. You missed it. And those in the boat worshipped. They worshipped. They were in the presence of God. And they just went somewhere mentally, physically, spiritually. They transcended the normal activities of life, the routine of fishing and boating and all of this stuff. And they realized they were in the presence of God. And they worshiped. About 5 years before I got here, 6 years or something, Lester told me the date the other day. I can't remember for the life of me, but I came to a gospel meeting or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And I remember that day so vividly. It was a great day. I loved it. But at the end, they sang the final song. I don't remember who they sang. They sang the final song. They were getting ready to go home, and I stopped everybody. I said, "Stop! Just wait a minute. Wait. I said, folks, I tried my best to give you my best sermon today, but I failed. And I said, would you come back tonight? And I think I can do better. And people came back that night after my sermon. You know what I told everybody? I tried my best to give you my best sermon. And then I did it Monday night, and Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. Every night I told you, I was trying to give you my best sermon, but I failed. I failed. Last night I said, the thing about my best sermon is that my best sermon I can't preach. Because my best sermon is the lifestyle. And there's always more to know about God, so there's always more I can learn and teach you about God, or that I can learn about God and then share about God. There's always more. No matter what you learn and know about God, there's always more. So I can't give you my best sermon. It's just not there. But I also just kind of feel like I failed. Now I'm trying. But I failed. Because the truth is, I failed Jesus. I failed. Last week, coming off of camp, as I was back in the back, Grant can tell you, he brought me the Lord's Supper back in the back, and I'm back there with my Bible or my computer. I'm trying to find a verse because I decided to change my lesson last week during the Lord's Supper. So my PowerPoint was up there, or my thing was up there, and I said I'm not going to do that sermon. I'm still working on that series about putting on Christ. And I'm not done with the full armor of Christ. I know we've talked about the sword of the Spirit, which usually is the last one people talk about, but I'm not done with that series. I got another lesson or two I want to do there. And I didn't suspend the series about putting on Christ this morning because this is what really is where I failed. We have turned what we do right here into an idea that we come and we do certain things and therefore we've worshiped. Just simply because we come and do something that we worship. I want to ask you this morning, when we came into this building collectively as a body, was it your intent to have a boat experience with God this morning? Where you worshiped like they worshiped that day? Did you come expecting Jesus to be here in such a way as you could bow down and in your heart and mind and spirit just be in that same kind of frame of mind that they had that night? Was that your expectation of this morning? And I fear, and myself included, I told the kids at camp, sometimes the place I don't worship enough is this hour because I'm so worried about doing this and doing that and getting everything right and getting all the announcements right. We got to have somebody in place. We're going to do things right. And we miss the experience of being in God's presence and giving our spirit to that. Am I speaking to anybody but myself this morning? Now, last week we had 10 folks raise their hand or come forward. Half the church was crying. That's worship. Maybe this lesson is not taking you there. Maybe you feel like I'm stepping on your toes or doing what I'm not. All I'm trying to say this morning is I want every time that I get around you guys that I experience Jesus and we worship. Graham yesterday was hitting the weed eater. Graham hates the weed eater, okay? I mean, I don't know anybody that loves it, maybe Tim. Tim, do you love the weed eater? But Graham was changed at camp, and hopefully you saw that last week. And I still see it this week, and I pray it's a permanent change. But we go through this life thing of ups and downs or whatever, but he was sharing with somebody that while he was hitting that weed eater, he was singing some praises to God. Is that worship? I hope it was. I hope it was a heart poured out to God in such a way that we just wanted to say, what a friend I have in Jesus. What a friend. Or we sing, when peace like a river tendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, it is well with my soul. Why? Because Jesus is right here with me. If I can choose to see him and worship. We're going to sing a song. Let's sing it. Let's find that place in your heart and mind and worship God right now as we stand in